The courtroom in downtown Seattle was dead silent, save for the distinct, cruel laughter of Vanessa Sinclair. She sat in the front row, smirking at the trembling, 8 months pregnant woman across the aisle, thinking she had already won. She had the man, the money, and the power. But arrogance has a way of blinding you to the details. Just as the mistress leaned over to whisper one final insult to the heartbroken wife, Judge Reginald Halloway slammed his gavel. He didn't look at the lawyers. He didn't look at the husband. He looked straight at Vanessa and asked one simple question. 6 words that didn't just silence the room, but completely destroyed 2 lives in a heartbeat. You think you know how this ends? You have no idea. Natalie Barrett stood in the center of her open-concept kitchen, staring at a receipt she had pulled from the pocket of her husband's charcoal-gray suit jacket. The morning sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Bellevue mansion, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. But Natalie felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She was 8 months pregnant. Her ankles were swollen. Her back ached constantly, and she had spent the last 6 months nesting, preparing for the arrival of their first son, Leo. She and Derek Barrett were the it couple of their circle. Derek was a partner at Barrett & Cole Architecture, a man who built skyscrapers and reshaped city skylines. Natalie had been a curator at the local art gallery before stepping back to manage their home and the pregnancy. The receipt was innocent enough at first glance. A dinner at the Crimson Table, a steakhouse downtown. But the date was from 2 nights ago. Tuesday. On Tuesday, Derek had told her he was in Portland, overseeing the structural reinforcements of a new hotel project. He had even FaceTimed her from a generic-looking hotel room, complaining about the rainy drive down I-5. So why was there a receipt for a $300 dinner in Seattle, time-stamped 8:45 p.m. on Tuesday? Natalie, babe, have you seen my gray jacket? The dry cleaner is coming in 10. Derek's voice boomed from the top of the stairs. He descended moments later, looking every inch the master of the universe. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair that was perfectly salt and peppered. He adjusted his cufflinks, flashing that charming, crooked smile that had swept Natalie off her feet 5 years ago. Natalie's hand trembled. She placed the receipt on the marble island. You weren't in Portland on Tuesday, she said, her voice small but steady. Derek paused at the bottom of the stairs. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes went flat. It was a look she had seen him give contractors who were behind schedule, a look of calculation. He walked over, picked up the receipt and crumpled it into a ball without even reading it. Don't be ridiculous, Nat. I drove back late. I didn't want to wake you. You had dinner for 2. She pressed her heart, hammering against her ribs. Oysters, champagne. Derek, I'm pregnant. You told me you were in a hotel room in Portland going to sleep. Derek sighed, the sound of a parent disappointed in a slow child. It was a business dinner, Natalie. A potential client. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd get like this. Hormonal. Paranoid. Paranoid? Natalie laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Who was the client? Jameson, from the city council. Natalie felt the floor drop out from under her. Jameson has a shellfish allergy. We went to his wedding, Derek. He wouldn't order 24 oysters. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek stopped pretending to look for his keys. He turned to her, and for the first time the mask slipped completely. The loving husband vanished, replaced by a cold stranger. Stop digging, Natalie, he warned, his voice low. You have a roof over your head. You have a black card in your wallet. You're having a baby. Just let it be. Is there someone else? He didn't answer. He just checked his Rolex, grabbed his briefcase, and walked to the door. I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. Natalie stood frozen as the heavy oak door slammed shut. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she walked to the window and watched his Porsche back out of the driveway. But as he turned onto the street, another car passed him, a bright red convertible. The driver, a woman with blonde hair and oversized sunglasses, waved at Derek. Natalie recognized the car. It belonged to Vanessa Sinclair, the new junior interior designer Derek had hired 6 months ago, the one he called brilliant but inexperienced, the one Natalie had invited to dinner twice, who had smiled at her across this very kitchen island. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't just a fling. It was right in front of her face. 2 days passed in a suffocating fog. Natalie tried to access the joint bank account to withdraw cash, just in case, but the transaction was declined. Insufficient funds. Panic flared in her chest. That account had over $50,000 in it last week. She logged into the banking app, but her password didn't work. She tried the backup email. Changed. She called Derek. Straight to voicemail. At 4:00 p.m. on Friday, the doorbell rang. Natalie waddled to the door, expecting a delivery for the nursery. Instead, a process server stood there, a grim-faced man in a cheap windbreaker. Natalie Barrett. Yes, you've been served. He thrust a thick manila envelope into her hands and walked away before she could even process the words. She tore open the envelope in the foyer. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner Derek Barrett. Respondent Natalie Barrett. Natalie. But it wasn't just a divorce filing. As she scanned the legal jargon, her knees gave out. She slid down the wall, sitting on the cold floor. Derek was filing for full custody of the unborn child. He was claiming Natalie was mentally unstable, citing prenatal psychosis and erratic behavior. He was requesting an emergency injunction to remove her from the marital home within 48 hours. He was throwing her out. "Oh my God," she whispered, clutching her stomach. "He's trying to take everything." Before she could stand up, the front door opened again. Derek walked in, but he wasn't alone. Vanessa Sinclair was with him. Vanessa looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine. She was wearing a white power suit that was tailored to perfection, a stark contrast to Natalie's baggy maternity leggings and stained oversized t-shirt. Vanessa surveyed the foyer as if she were measuring it for drapes. "Derek, you can't be serious." Natalie gasped, struggling to get to her feet. "You bring her here now." Derek didn't look at Natalie. He looked at Vanessa. "I told you she'd be dramatic." Vanessa stepped forward, the click-clack of her designer heels echoing on the tile. She looked down at Natalie with a mixture of pity and disgust. "It's not his fault, sweetie," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Derek needs a partner who matches his ambition, not someone who... Let herself go." She gestured vaguely at Natalie's swollen belly. "Honestly, look at you. You're a mess. Derek deserves better than a weeping hormonal anchor dragging him down." "Get out of my house," Natalie screamed, tears finally spilling over. "It's not your house anymore," Derek said, coldly pulling a document from his jacket. "The judge signed the temporary order an hour ago. You have until Sunday to vacate. Vanessa will be moving in to help manage the estate and prepare for the baby." "My baby!" Natalie shrieked. "You are not touching my son!" Vanessa laughed. It was a light, airy sound that made Natalie's blood run cold. "Oh, honey, We've already picked out a new nursery theme. That tacky jungle thing you did. It has to go. We're thinking modern minimalist. White and gold. Vanessa leaned in closer, dropping her voice so only Natalie could hear. Don't worry. We'll send you pictures. Once Derek gets full custody, you can visit. Maybe on weekends, if you get a job and a psychiatrist. Derek checked his watch. Come on, Van. We have reservations at Nobu. Natalie, start packing. The movers come Monday for whatever you leave behind. They turned and walked out. They left the front door wide open, letting the cold wind blow in, chilling Natalie to the bone. She sat there for an hour. The divorce papers crinkled in her fist. They thought she was weak. They thought she was just a hormonal housewife. They thought having the money and the lawyers meant they had already won. But as the sun set and the house went dark, Natalie stopped crying. She placed a hand on her stomach. They think we're broken, Leo, she whispered to the darkness. But they forgot who your grandfather was. Natalie's father hadn't been a rich man, but he had been the best private investigator in Chicago before he passed. He had taught her how to look for things people didn't want found. She pulled herself up using the banister. She didn't have money. She didn't have a lawyer yet. But she knew where Derek kept his old laptop, the one he thought he had wiped 3 years ago, the one with the cracked screen hidden in the attic insulation. She wasn't going to pack. She was going to dig. The attic was freezing. Natalie navigated the crawl space with difficulty, her breath visible in the flashlight's beam. She pushed aside rolls of pink fiberglass insulation until her fingers brushed against the cold metal of a MacBook Pro from 2018. Derek was meticulous, but he was also arrogant. He assumed that because the screen was shattered and the hard drive encrypted, it was trash. He had tossed it up here years ago when he upgraded, likely forgetting it existed. Natalie took it downstairs and plugged it into the living room TV via HDMI. It powered on the fan, whirring loudly. Password prompt. She tried his birthday. Incorrect. She tried the date they met. Incorrect. She tried the name of his first firm. Incorrect. She closed her eyes, thinking back to 2018. That was the year he landed the massive waterfront contract. The year he became obsessed with legacy. She typed Empire 2018 access granted. Natalie didn't waste time looking at old photos. She went straight to the local backups of his email archives. Derek had a habit of mixing personal and business accounts to hide assets from the IRS, something he had joked about early in their marriage, back when she thought his creative accounting was just harmless ambition. She spent the next 6 hours combing through PDFs and spreadsheets. At first, it was just boring architectural schematics. But then she found a folder labeled Project Vi. The files dated back 14 months, long before Vanessa officially started at the firm. There were receipts for an apartment in downtown Seattle, a penthouse listed under a shell company, Vandelay Holdings. The rent was $6,500 a month, paid directly from an offshore account in the Caymans. Natalie cross-referenced the dates. The offshore account was funded by consulting fees from a construction company owned by Derek's best friend, Greg. It was a kickback scheme. Derek was overcharging his clients, funneling the excess money into the offshore account, and using it to fund his life with Vanessa. But then she found the smoking gun, a scanned document from a fertility clinic, dated 4 months ago. Patient Vanessa Sinclair. Procedure IVF consultation. Notes. Male partner provided sample. Paternity verified. Natalie froze. 4 months ago, she was already 4 months pregnant with Leo. Derek and Vanessa were planning a baby while he was still playing the doting father-to-be with her. And then a simpler, darker realization. If they were doing IVF, why Derek had always bragged about his super swimmers. She scrolled down to the medical notes attached to Derek's profile in the clinic file. Patient Derek Barrett, status vasectomy performed 2015. Reversal unsuccessful 2021. Sperm retrieval required for IVF. The room spun. Vasectomy in 2015. Natalie met Derek in 2019. He told her he wanted a big family. He told her they were trying naturally. When she got pregnant 8 months ago, he had cried tears of joy. He had acted surprised, but if he had a vasectomy in 2015, that couldn't be reversed. Natalie looked down at her stomach. If Derek was sterile, then who was Leo's father? She felt a wave of nausea. She had never been with anyone else. Not once. She was faithful. She was certain. Unless... She frantically searched the laptop for medical records. She found a folder from a trip they took to Mexico last year for their anniversary. They had both gotten food poisoning. They went to a private clinic Derek recommended. She opened the file labeled Natalie_medical_Cancun. It wasn't food poisoning. The report was in Spanish, but she used her phone to translate it. It was a receipt for sedation and intrauterine insemination. Derek had drugged her. The realization was so horrific, she clamped her hand over her mouth to stop a scream. He didn't want a baby with her naturally. He couldn't. But he needed an heir to secure a trust fund release from his grandfather, a clause she remembered seeing in their prenup. The principal receives full control of the Barrett Trust upon the birth of a legitimate heir. He had used a donor. He had violated her in the most medical, clinical, perverse way imaginable just to secure his inheritance. And now that the baby was almost here, he was discarding her and taking the child to raise with Vanessa. He was going to steal her baby, a baby that biologically wasn't even his, to unlock millions of dollars. Natalie pulled the hard drive out of the laptop. She wasn't just fighting for money anymore. She was fighting a monster. She grabbed her phone and dialed the one number she knew she shouldn't calling, but had no choice. "Tobias," she said when the groggy voice answered. "Natalie, it's 3 a.m. Why are you calling me? I thought you and Mr. Perfect were living the dream." Tobias Wright, her ex-boyfriend from college, the one she left for Derek. He was now a disbarred lawyer working as a paralegal for a strip mall firm, but he was the smartest person she knew. "I need help," she sobbed. "I'm going to kill him, Tobias. I'm going to destroy him." "Slow down," Tobias said, his voice sharpening instantly. "Where are you?" "I'm in the house. I have evidence. Tax fraud, adultery, and medical assault." "Pack a bag," Tobias said. "Get out of there now. If he knows what you know, you're not safe. Meet me at the diner on 4th. Bring the hard drive." The diner on 4th Avenue was a relic of a forgotten Seattle smelling of stale coffee and rain-damp wool. Natalie sat in a booth with peeling red vinyl seats, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot water. Across from her, Tobias Wright looked nothing like the polished law student she remembered. He wore a rumpled hoodie, had dark circles under his eyes, and tapped a pen nervously against the table. But his eyes, sharp, intelligent, and currently blazing with fury, were the same. He had been reading the files from the hard drive for the last hour in silence. Finally, he slammed the laptop shut, startling a waitress nearby. "He's a monster," Tobias said, his voice low and dangerous. "The financial fraud is one thing. That gets him prison time. But the medical records, the Mexico trip." He looked at Natalie, his expression softening into profound sorrow. "Natalie, that's reproductive coercion. It's assault. He drugged you to implant a stranger's biological material into you because his ego couldn't handle admitting he was sterile. Natalie stared into her mug. He talks about the baby like it's a possession. He needs an heir to unlock his trust fund. That's all Leo is to him. A key to a vault. And Vanessa, Tobias asked. She wants the lifestyle. She knows about the trust. If they raise the baby, they get the millions. If I raise him, Derek gets a stipend, but the bulk of the estate stays locked until the child is 18. Tobias rubbed his temples. Okay, here's the bad news. Derek has hired Richard Montgomery. You know him. Natalie shook her head. They call him the Shredder. He charges $1,000 an hour. He's going to bury us in motions. He's going to argue that you obtained the hard drive illegally, that it's inadmissible fruit of the poisonous tree, because you hacked his password. He's going to portray you as a paranoid, tech-obsessed stalker. So we can't use the evidence, Natalie asked, panic rising. We can, Tobias said, a wicked glint appearing in his eye. But not the way they expect. If we walk in there, waving the hard drive, Montgomery will have it thrown out in 5 minutes. We need them to open the door themselves. How? We play dumb, Tobias said. We let them think you're exactly what they say. You are weak, emotional, broken. We let them get arrogant. Vanessa is a narcissist, right? And Derek thinks he's the smartest man in the room. We need to get them on the stand and let them brag. We need to bait Vanessa into admitting something that makes the medical records relevant for impeachment. Tobias reached across the table and took her hand. I can't represent you officially. I'm still suspended from the bar. But my boss, Eleanor Hattie, can. She's 72, wears hearing aids, and looks like everyone's grandmother. They will underestimate her. They will laugh at her. And that is exactly how we kill them. For the next 3 weeks, Natalie lived in a purgatory of fear. She moved into a cheap motel on the outskirts of Tacoma using the last of her cash. Derek had frozen everything. He sent threatening texts daily, demanding she surrender custody of the fetus immediately to ensure proper prenatal care. Vanessa was worse. She didn't text, she posted. Natalie's friends sent her screenshots of Vanessa's Instagram stories. Photo of the nursery in Natalie's old house, now repainted white and gold. Caption: Out with the old depressed energy, in with the luxury. Baby Barrett deserves a mom who isn't a mental case. Hashtag new beginnings. Hashtag boy mom. Photo of Vanessa holding Derek's hand at a gala. Caption: Finally, a power couple that makes sense. Some women just aren't built for the pressure. Don't worry, sweetie. We'll take it from here. Every post was a dagger. But Natalie didn't respond. She didn't block them. She printed every single one just as Tobias instructed. The baby Leo kicked harder these days, as if he knew his mother was preparing for war. Natalie spent her nights talking to him. You are mine, she promised. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the trust. But they will never, ever own you. 2 days before the trial, Tobias called. They've expedited the hearing. Judge Holloway is presiding. Natalie's stomach dropped. Holloway Derek plays golf with him. I know, Tobias said. Montgomery requested him specifically. They think the fix is in. Holloway is old school. He hates drama, hates emotional outbursts, and generally sides with the higher earner. It's going to be brutal, Nat. You need to be made of stone. No crying, no screaming. No matter what that woman says to you. I'm ready, Natalie said, though her hands were shaking. Good. Because we found the donor. Natalie froze. The donor. For the for Leo. It wasn't a random anonymous donor, Tobias said, his voice grim. Derek is cheap, remember. He didn't want to pay the agency fees. I dug into the metadata of the clinic files. The donor ID matches a former intern at Derek's firm, a kid named Caleb. Derek paid him $5,000 cash for a confidential project 3 years ago. Caleb, Natalie whispered. She remembered him. A sweet blonde engineering student with blue eyes. Does Caleb know? He thinks he was donating for a generic bank. He has no idea his boss used it to impregnate his wife without consent. Is he coming? He's the nuclear option, Tobias said. We only use him if Holloway refuses to look at the laptop. But if we play this right, Holloway will be the one asking the questions. The King County Superior Courtroom 4B was an arena of mahogany and judgment. The air conditioning was set to Arctic, a tactic often used to keep tempers cool, but today it just made the atmosphere brittle. On the left side sat Derek Barrett. He looked impeccable in a Navy custom suit, exuding an air of tragic nobility. Next to him was Richard Montgomery, the shredder. A man with a tan so deep it looked lacquered and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And then there was Vanessa. She sat in the gallery directly behind Derek, technically a spectator until called as a witness, but she acted like the queen holding court. She wore a fitted charcoal dress that screamed modest but expensive, paired with pearls. When Natalie waddled in heavy with 8 months of pregnancy and leaning on Eleanor Hattie's arm, Vanessa audibly scoffed. "Look at her," Vanessa whispered loudly to a friend she had brought along. "She looks like she slept in a dumpster." Natalie ignored her. She sat at the defendant's table. Eleanor Hattie, a tiny woman with frizzy grey hair and oversized glasses, began arranging her files with agonizing slowness. Montgomery watched her with a smirk. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Reginald Holloway swept into the room. He was a bear of a man, with bushy white eyebrows and a reputation for crushing lawyers who wasted his time. He sat down, adjusted his robes, and glared at the room over his spectacles. "This is an emergency custody hearing regarding the unborn child of the Barrett marriage," Holloway grumbled. "Petitioner claims the mother is unfit due to psychological instability and lack of means. Respondent claims, well, we'll get to that. Mr. Montgomery, you have the floor." Montgomery stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't use notes. He prowled. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case. Mr. Barrett is a pillar of this community, a builder, a visionary. He has tried for years to support his wife. But Mrs. Barrett has descended into a spiral of paranoia and delusion. She has abandoned the marital home, she has no income, and she is currently living in a motel that, quite frankly, isn't fit for a stray dog, let alone a newborn." He gestured to Natalie. "We are asking for sole legal and physical custody to be awarded to Mr. Barrett immediately upon birth. We also ask for a restraining order to prevent Mrs. Barrett from absconding with the child. We have a stable home ready. We have a nursery. We have a loving support system in Ms. Sinclair, who has graciously stepped in to help manage Mr. Barrett's affairs." Holloway looked at Natalie. "Ms. Hattie, your opening at all, Eleanor." Hattie stood up. Her hands shook slightly. A tremor, Tobias had told Natalie, was fake, designed to make her look frail. "Your Honor," she said in a wavering voice, "we simply ask, why? Why is a man who ignored his wife for months suddenly so interested in a baby he claimed he didn't have time for?" Montgomery rolled his eyes. "Objection," Argumentative. Sustained, Holloway sighed. Move to testimony. Derek took the stand first. He was perfect. He cried on cue when talking about how much he wanted to be a father. He painted Natalie as a woman who had lost her grip on reality, claiming she accused him of wild conspiracies. She thinks I'm a spy, Derek said with a sad chuckle. She thinks I have secret bank accounts. It's the hormones, I suppose. I just want to protect my son. Then it was Vanessa's turn. Vanessa Sinclair walked to the witness stand like it was a runway. She swore in on the Bible with a delicate hand. Ms. Sinclair, Montgomery said smoothly, what is your relationship to the petitioner? I am his partner, Vanessa said, beaming at Derek. And his chief design officer. We are building a life together. And have you observed the respondent, Mrs. Barrett? Vanessa turned her gaze to Natalie. Her eyes were cold, dead sharks. I have. It's heartbreaking, really. She's just checked out. When I tried to help her with the nursery design, she screamed at me. She was hysterical. I don't think she's capable of loving a child. She's too obsessed with herself. And you are prepared to help raise this child? Absolutely, Vanessa said. I love children, and Derek and I. We are ready to give this baby the life he deserves. Private schools travel stability, things she can't provide. Thank you, Miss Sinclair. Montgomery sat down, looking smug. Eleanor Hattie stood up. She shuffled to the podium. She looked confused, fumbling with her papers. Vanessa watched her with open contempt, a smirk playing on her lips. Miss Sinclair, Eleanor wheezed, you say you want to give the baby stability. Yes, Vanessa said, popping the P. Obviously. And you and Mr. Barrett, you are in love, deeply. When did this love begin? Montgomery stood up. Objection, relevance. It goes to the stability of the home, Your Honor, Eleanor said softly. Holloway waved his hand. I'll allow it, briefly. We fell in love about 6 months ago, Vanessa lied smoothly. After his marriage had already broken down. Eleanor nodded, looking down at a piece of paper. 6 months ago. I see, so around January. Yes. Miss Sinclair, are you aware that perjury is a crime? Vanessa laughed, a tinkling, mocking sound that echoed in the silent courtroom. I am aware. I'm not lying, unlike some people in this room. She shot a nasty look at Natalie. Eleanor didn't flinch. You posted a photo on Instagram 3 days ago. Caption, finally a power couple. You were mocking Mrs. Barrett's appearance in the comments. Were you not? You called her a whale. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. It was a private joke. I was frustrated. She's been stalking us. Stalking you? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. From a motel room. She's obsessed. Vanessa snapped, her composure cracking just a fraction. She knows Derek doesn't want her. She knows she's just a vessel. The room went quiet. Even Holloway looked up. A vessel? Eleanor asked. That's an interesting choice of word. Why would you call the mother of Mr. Barrett's child? A vessel. Vanessa rolled her eyes, getting comfortable in her arrogance. She leaned into the microphone, deciding to deliver the killing blow she had rehearsed in her head. She wanted to humiliate Natalie. She wanted to show the judge that Natalie was nothing more than an incubator. Look, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with condescension. Let's be real. Derek is the genius. Derek is the money. Natalie is just the oven. She's carrying the baby, sure. But she didn't contribute anything else. She's just the surrogate he had to use because... She stopped herself, realizing she was straying off script. Because, Eleanor pressed, because he felt sorry for her. Vanessa recovered. But honestly, it's pathetic. She sits there acting like a victim, but she's just trying to cash out. She knows she's useless. That's why she's making up lies. Vanessa looked at the judge, flashing a brilliant smile. Your Honor, honestly look at her. She's a mess. Derek and I have planned everything. We have the schedule, the nannies, the schools. We are the parents. She is just an unfortunate biological necessity. The cruelty of the statement hung in the air. Natalie clutched her stomach, tears stinging her eyes. Derek looked uncomfortable, but he didn't stop her. Judge Halloway was staring at Vanessa. He wasn't writing anymore. He had taken off his glasses. He looked from Vanessa to Derek, and then to the weeping pregnant woman. Ms. Sinclair, Judge Halloway said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of thunder. Yes, Your Honor. Vanessa perked up, thinking he was engaging with her. You seem to know a great deal about the planning of this child. You mentioned we have planned everything. Yes, we have. And you mentioned Mrs. Barrett is merely a vessel and an unfortunate biological necessity. Well, it's true, Vanessa scoffed. Judge Halloway leaned forward. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Ms. Sinclair, Halloway said, his eyes narrowing into slits. If she is merely a vessel, are you implying that you believe you have a superior claim to this child? I'm implying I'm the better mother, Vanessa said defiantly. Halloway paused. He picked up a document Eleanor Hattie had quietly placed on his bench before the session began, a document Montgomery hadn't noticed because he was too busy preening. It was the timeline Tobias had constructed. Halloway looked at Vanessa. I have a question for you, Ms. Sinclair, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer it. Vanessa crossed her legs. Ask away. Halloway held up the paper. You claim your relationship started 6 months ago. Yet this court has a receipt for an IVF consultation at the Pacific Fertility Center dated 4 months prior to that. A consultation attended by Mr. Barrett. And you. Vanessa's face went white. The blood drained from her cheeks so fast it looked like she might faint. Derek stood up, knocking his chair over. Objection. That's confidential medical. Sit down, Halloway roared, slamming his gavel so hard the wood cracked. I am asking the witness. Halloway turned his gaze back to Vanessa, who was now trembling. My question is this. Miss Sinclair, if you were present at the fertility consultation to create this child, why is Mrs. Barrett the one who is pregnant? The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at Derek. Derek looked at the floor. She had 2 choices. Admit she was the intended mother, and the IVF failed, revealing the affair went back a year. Or admit the truth that they used Natalie as an unsuspecting surrogate because Vanessa couldn't carry a child or simply didn't want to ruin her figure. But she didn't have to answer. Her panic answered for her. We, Vanessa stammered. We didn't think she wasn't supposed to find out. Find out what? Halloway pressed his voice like ice. That she was inseminated artificially, without her consent. It wasn't like that, Vanessa shrieked, her cool facade shattering completely. Derek said she wouldn't know. He said she was stupid. He said she'd just think it was a miracle. We needed the heir for the trust fund, and I didn't want the stretch marks. She was supposed to just hand it over. The courtroom erupted. Pandemonium broke out in courtroom 4B. The gallery gasped as reporters were frantically typing on their phones, and Eleanor. Hattie sat back in her chair, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. Derek Barrett didn't look like a master of the universe anymore. He looked like a cornered rat. He lunged toward the witness stand, his face purple with rage. "Shut up, Vanessa, shut your mouth!" he screamed. "Bailiff, restrain the petitioner," Judge Holloway bellowed. Two bailiffs grabbed Derek by the arms and forced him back into his chair. Montgomery, the shredder, was frantically stuffing papers into his briefcase, looking like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. He knew that what had just happened wasn't just a lost case. It was a career-ending felony confession on the record. Vanessa was sobbing now, mascara running down her face in black rivulets. "You tricked me," she yelled at the judge. "You weren't supposed to ask that. It's not fair. We deserve that money. It's Barrett money." Judge Holloway waited for the noise to subside. He looked down at Derek with an expression of pure revulsion. "Mr. Montgomery," Holloway said, his voice deadly calm, "your client's partner just admitted to conspiracy to commit fraud, and if I'm understanding this correctly, medical battery. Do you have anything to say before I hold you all in contempt?" Montgomery stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Your Honor, clearly, Ms. Sinclair is overwrought." She misspoke. "My client had no knowledge of—" "Save it for the criminal trial," Holloway snapped. "I am inclined to grant full emergency custody to Mrs. Barrett immediately. However, there is the matter of paternity. If Mr. Barrett is the biological father, he still has rights regardless of his despicable character." Natalie felt a cold hand clutch her heart. This was it. Even after everything, if Derek was the father, he could still torment her for 18 years. He could still fight for visitation. He could still use Leo. Eleanor Hattie stood up slowly. "Your Honor, regarding the paternity. We have one final witness." Derek's head snapped up. "Witness who?" "I'm the father. It's my sperm." "Call Caleb Vance," Eleanor said clearly. The heavy doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A young man walked in. He was wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, looking terrified but determined. He had sandy blonde hair and bright blue eyes, the same eyes Natalie had seen on her ultrasound scan. Derek went pale. He recognized him instantly. The intern. "Objection!" Montgomery shouted. "This witness was not on the list. He is a rebuttal witness to the claim of paternity," Eleanor countered. "And he is crucial to the safety of this child." Judge Holloway waved Caleb to the stand. "Swear him in." Caleb took the oath, his hands shaking. He sat down and looked at Derek, not with fear, but with betrayal. "Mr. Vance," Eleanor said gently, "do you know the petitioner?" "Derek Barrett." "Yes," Caleb said, his voice cracking. "I interned for him at Barrett & Cole 3 years ago." "Did Mr. Barrett ever ask you for a favor?" "Yes. He told me he was working on a confidential project for a biotech firm. He said they needed biological samples from healthy men with high IQs to calibrate their equipment. He offered me $5,000 cash. I was a student. I was broke. I didn't know." "You didn't know what Caleb—" "I didn't know he was keeping it," Caleb said, tears welling in his eyes. "I didn't know he was sterile. I found out yesterday when your investigator called me. He used my sample to impregnate his wife." Caleb looked at Natalie. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Barrett. I swear to God I didn't know." Natalie wept openly now, but they were tears of relief. Derek wasn't the father. He had no claim. He was nothing to her son. Eleanor turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have the DNA test results from the amniocentesis performed last week. It confirms a 99.9% match between the unborn child and Mr. Vance. Derek Barrett is not the father. He is a fraud. He stole this young man's biology and assaulted his wife to secure a trust fund. Derek slumped in his chair. The fight had left him. He looked small. Judge Halloway stood up. He didn't even look at his notes. In 30 years on the bench, Halloway said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage, I have never seen such a grotesque display of greed and narcissism. You didn't just cheat on your wife, Mr. Barrett. You treated her like livestock. And you, Miss Sinclair, your arrogance is matched only by your cruelty. He picked up his gavel. I am stripping Derek Barrett of all parental rights effective immediately. He has no biological claim, and his conduct proves he is unfit to be around any child. I am issuing a permanent restraining order. Neither Mr. Barrett nor Mrs. Sinclair are to come within 500 feet of Natalie Barrett or her child. Furthermore, Halloway continued, looking at the bailiffs, I am referring this transcript to the district attorney's office. Mr. Bailiff, please take Mr. Barrett and Mrs. Sinclair into custody, pending charges for fraud and reproductive coercion. The sound of the gavel slamming down was the sweetest sound Natalie had ever heard. As the bailiffs moved in handcuffing Derek and a screaming Vanessa. Natalie stood up. She walked over to where Vanessa was being dragged away. Vanessa looked wild, her hair messed up, her eyes manic. You're nothing, she spat at Natalie. You're broke. You have nothing without him. Natalie placed a hand on her stomach and smiled a real, genuine smile. I have my son, she said quietly, and I have the truth, and unlike you, Vanessa, I'm free. The gavel had fallen, but the echo of it seemed to vibrate in the air for weeks. The sentencing hearing, held a month after the custody trial, was the final nail in the coffin of the Barrett empire. The courtroom was packed. The public, initially captivated by the scandal, now clamored for justice. They wanted to see the Titans fall. Derek Barrett stood before Judge Halloway, no longer in a custom Italian suit, but in an orange jumpsuit that washed out his complexion. His silver hair, once perfectly coiffed, was lank and greasy. He looked older. He looked broken. Judge Halloway didn't mince words. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at Derek with a mixture of pity and disdain. Mr. Barrett. Halloway began, his voice echoing in the silent room. You spent your life building structures, skyscrapers, monuments to your own ego. But in your pursuit of a legacy, you forgot the most fundamental law of architecture. A house built on a rotten foundation will always collapse. You treated your wife as an incubator and your unborn child as a financial key. You forged medical documents, you coerced a young employee, and you defrauded your own family trust. Derek stared at the floor, his jaw tight. For the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, I sentence you to 5 years. For the count of reproductive coercion and assault, I sentence you to an additional 5 years to be served consecutively. You will have a decade to think about the difference between a legacy and a liability. When the bailiffs took him away, Derek didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look for Vanessa. He simply vanished behind the heavy steel door, a man erased by his own hubris. Vanessa's fate was less lengthy, but perhaps more humiliating. She had taken a plea deal, turning on Derek to save herself from the maximum sentence. She received 3 years for conspiracy. But for a woman whose entire identity was built on social standing, beauty and perception, prison was a fate worse than death. Natalie heard later from Tobias that Vanessa had been assigned to the prison laundry detail. The woman who once sneered at Natalie's tacky nursery decor was now scrubbing industrial stains out of inmates' uniforms for 12 cents an hour. Her white and gold aesthetic was replaced by concrete grey and fluorescent buzz. The irony was not lost on anyone. But for Natalie, the real work was just beginning. The birth of Leo came 2 weeks after the sentencing. It wasn't the glamorous private suite birth Derek had planned. It was in a regular hospital room with nurses who worked double shifts and fluorescent lights that hummed. But it was peaceful. There was no Derek pacing the room checking his watch. There was no Vanessa trying to micromanage the doctors. There was just Natalie gripping Eleanor Hattie's hand, breathing through the pain. When the doctor finally placed the screaming, red-faced bundle onto her chest, Natalie didn't feel fear. She felt a surge of power so intense it made her dizzy. He was here. He was safe. And he was entirely hers. "Hello, Leo," she whispered, brushing the damp hair from his forehead. "We made it." The first 3 months were a blur of sleepless nights and financial anxiety. Derek's assets were frozen by the feds. The house in Bellevue was seized to pay off creditors. Natalie was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in West Seattle. It was drafty, and the appliances were mismatched, but it was a sanctuary. Then came the knock on the door that changed everything. It wasn't a process server this time. It was a man in a charcoal suit carrying a briefcase that looked more expensive than Natalie's car. He introduced himself as Arthur Pennington, the executor of the Barrett Family Trust. Natalie braced herself. "If you're here to take the baby," she said, blocking the doorway, "you're going to need a SWAT team." Pennington smiled gently. "Quite the opposite, Mrs. Barrett. May I come in?" They sat at her small kitchen table. Pennington laid out a series of documents. "Old Mr. Barrett, Derek's grandfather, has been following the proceedings very closely," Pennington explained. "He was profoundly disturbed by the revelations regarding his grandson. The trust has a strict moral turpitude clause. Derek has been formally disinherited. He will not see a dime of the family fortune, not now, not ever." "I don't want their money," Natalie said firmly. "I don't want anything attached to that name." "Mr. Barrett anticipated you might say that," Pennington said. "However, he also believes in blood, or rather, he believes in sprit. He watched you in that courtroom, Natalie. He saw a woman who fought with the ferocity of a lioness. He told me, 'That woman has more Barrett fire in her little finger than Derek had in his whole body.'" Pennington slid a check across the table. It wasn't a check for her. It was a trust document. "He has redirected the education and living stipend, originally intended for Derek's heir to Leo. He argues that while Leo may not share the Barrett DNA, he is the child who saved the family from being led by a criminal. The grandfather considers Leo his great-grandson in every way that matters." The sum was enough to secure Leo's future forever. College, a home stability. Natalie stared at the paper tears pricking her eyes. It wasn't hush money. It was respect. "Thank him for me," Natalie whispered. "But tell him Leo will know the truth. All of it." "He insists on it," Pennington replied. With the financial pressure lifted, Natalie didn't retreat into a life of leisure. She couldn't. The fire that had been ignited in the courtroom refused to die down. She thought about the other women, the ones who didn't have a Tobias or an Eleanor or a hidden hard drive. 6 months post-trial. Natalie launched the glass house. It wasn't just a consulting firm. It was a fortress for the discarded. She rented a small office space in Pioneer Square, brick-walled and cozy. Her first client was a woman whose husband, a prominent surgeon, had hidden $3 million in cryptocurrency before filing for divorce. Natalie used the skills her father had taught her: the forensic accounting, the digital digging, the patience. She found the crypto wallet keys hidden inside the metadata of family photos. When she handed the evidence to the woman's lawyer, the look of relief on the client's face was worth more than any paycheck. Natalie was no longer just a survivor. She was a weapon. On a rainy Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Natalie wiped spit up from her shoulder and opened it to find Caleb Vance standing there, holding a wet umbrella and a brown paper bag. "Bagels," he said, holding them up like a peace offering. "And cream cheese, the good kind." Caleb had become a fixture in their lives. It was awkward at first, navigating the reality that this kind 24-year-old engineering student was biologically the father of the baby cooing in the crib. But they had found a rhythm. He wasn't Dad in the traditional sense yet. He was Caleb. He was the guy who fixed the leaky faucet and read Goodnight Moon with funny voices. "Come in." Natalie smiled, stepping aside. "He's just waking up." Caleb shook out his umbrella and walked over to the playpen. Leo, now sitting up and babbling, reached out with chubby arms. Caleb picked him up with a natural ease that still surprised Natalie. "Hey, buddy," Caleb murmured, bouncing him gently. "Did you give your mom a hard time last night?" Natalie watched them from the kitchen pouring coffee. She saw the resemblance in the eyes that piercing, honest blue. But more than that, she saw the kindness. Leo wouldn't grow up with Derek's cold calculation. He would grow up with Caleb's warmth and Natalie's grit. "Tobias called," Natalie said, handing Caleb a mug. "He passed the bar exam, finally." "That's great." Caleb grinned. "Is he going to work with you?" "Partner," Natalie corrected. "Wright and Barrett. The glass house is expanding. We have 3 new cases next week. High profile." Caleb looked at her, his expression serious. "You're amazing, Nat. You know that most people would have crumbled. You built a whole new life." "I didn't have a choice," Natalie said, looking out the window at the grey Seattle skyline. "When you're walking through hell, you don't stop to admire the view. You keep walking until you find the exit." She walked over and took Leo from Caleb, holding her son close. He smelled like baby powder and rain. The nightmare was over. The monsters were in cages of their own making. Derek was rotting in a cell, likely telling anyone who would listen that he was a victim of a conspiracy. Vanessa was learning the hard way that beauty fades, but a criminal record lasts forever. They had tried to write Natalie's story for her. They tried to make her a tragedy, a footnote in Derek's biography. But they forgot that the author of a story holds the pen. Natalie kissed Leo's forehead. She looked around her apartment filled with toys, paperwork, the smell of coffee, and the warmth of genuine friendship. It wasn't the mansion in Bellevue. It wasn't the life she thought she wanted 5 years ago. It was better. It was real. "So," Caleb said, breaking the silence. "Bagels." Natalie laughed, a sound that felt light and free. "Yeah, let's eat." She turned away from the window, leaving the rain and the past behind her. She had a business to run, a son to raise, and a breakfast to share. The glass house had shattered, yes. But the woman standing in the wreckage had built a fortress out of the shards. Natalie didn't just win a court case. She reclaimed her entire existence from 2 people who treated human beings like disposable chess pieces. Derek and Vanessa had the money, the power, and the arrogance, but they lacked the one thing that actually matters humanity. They thought Natalie was weak because she was kind, but they learned the hard way that a mother's love is the most dangerous force on earth. Justice wasn't just served, it was absolute. If this story of betrayal and redemption had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells YouTube you want more drama like this. And if you believe that karma always comes, collecting in the end, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. What would you have done in Natalie's shoes? Would you have let Caleb into your life? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.